It's so important for us to be our authentic selves, even when we're at the workplace. And our next panel addresses the need to be authentic in just that regard, including in times of crisis as well. Please welcome to the stage moderator Dora Maria Abreu, Derek Jones, Lorenzo Payton, Fawn Sanchez, and Joanna Pena Bickley as they share their stories of lifelong journeys to have comfort in showing up authentically.
Welcome to Authenticity Matters. My name is Dora Maria Abreu. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I am a regional program manager here at Amazon. I've been here for a year now, and I am working on the engineering excellence team. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Take it away, Derek.
Hello, everyone. My name is Derek Jones, and my pronouns are he and him. And I've heard from some really reliable sources, my daughter and son, Brittany and Cairo, that I am the best father in the entire world. And also my wife, Brittany, said I'm the best husband as well. I've also been an Amazonian for 8 years, and I'm currently the Workplace Health and Safety Director supporting Global Specialty Fulfillment and the retail organization. And in those businesses, it includes all the cool businesses, Prime Now, AmXL, Whole Food Market, as well as Amazon Go Fresh and our specialty retail stores. I'm currently based in Nashville, Tennessee, Nash Vegas, depending on who you ask. And I've spent my entire time here at Amazon, starting off at BNA2, a non-sort facility in Lebanon, Tennessee. I'm really, really excited to participate in this panel, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Fawn Sanchez. I am the manager of the AWS Enterprise Support Training Team. We offer customer services to our customers who have signed up for AWS Enterprise Support Services. So my team does e-learning and instructor-led training for our TAMs and enterprise support managers. I've been at Amazon for 7.5 years. I started in staffing for high volume hiring. So I was fortunate enough to be able to participate in launching several new fulfillment centers, mostly in the Texas area, and then moved from that into training our HR business partners. And then prior to coming to Amazon, I served in the US Army as a human resource manager for 8 years. I am also the vice president of our Indigenous at Amazon Affinity Group, and I am also a mom, so I'm also a homeschooling teacher right now to a 12-year-old girl and a preschooler, little 4-year-old. So nice to meet you, and thanks for having me.
Okay, Joanna, you can go next.
Sure. Okay. Hi, I'm Joanna Pena Bickley. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I am the head of research and design for Alexa devices here in Sunnyvale, California. And I'm also the president of Women in Design, which is our affinity group within the Amazon design community. So that's by day. For the rest of the life part is that I am a mom and a wife. I'm a mom of 4 and a recent empty nester. I've been at Amazon roughly going on 3 years. And I started off in AWS, where I was the head of design for the Internet of Things, and then transitioned into this fantastic role where I got to lead the research and design efforts of all of our Alexa devices, like our Amazon Echo, the Echo Show, the Echo Buds, the Echo Auto. We could go on and on and on. I hope every single one of you at least plays around with one of them.
So to introduce myself, my name is Lorenzo Patton. My pronouns are he and him. I am the Vice President of Finance Operations Services. So we are a team of roughly 4,000 people in about 15 countries supporting accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, Six Sigma Excellence for FTBS, as well as a project management team. I am the proud father of 4. I have an amazing wife, and she's kept us all in check, but I'm also the father of a Welsh Corgi, Bunny, and a Chinchilla. So our house is loud, active, and quite a bit of fun. Had the privilege of being with the company for about 23 years, or over 23 years now, and I'm based here in Seattle. So I look forward to the panel today and being able to talk to you all.
Thank you very much, all of you, for your introductions. Let's dive right in. As we prepared for this session, it was just very clear that COVID is very much on our minds. And aside from, I guess, all the other impacts as well, it's also impacting how we show up authentically. And it was a pretty strong theme in the discussion, but tell me more about that. Like, how do you remain authentic and to who you are, not changing your behavior that doesn't feel natural? Like, how do you go about handling some of those nuances, right? So we have the intersection of our community to work, our own safety, right? And then humanity as part of that as well. And you're adding your cultural nuances to that as well. How is that for you in that changing of not just your thinking, but also action-wise in your authenticity and how you show up every day? And I guess we can start with Lorenzo.
Well, thank you. So let me start by saying that the impact on COVID has been disproportional in Black, Latin, and Native American communities. If you're a Black American, your chance of dying from complications from the virus are about 2.3 times that of your white peers. And if you're in the Latin or Native American communities, about 1.5. So it's a very real, very pertinent thing, and it has a huge impact. Additionally, it's changed how we interact. The fact that many of us are used to those daily personal interactions that are critical to building community and relationships, and that's all been disrupted. So, and beyond that, now for many of us, our worlds are perceived through these little screens, or these little boxes on our computer screens, and that be it in your professional life, your school life, your interpersonal relationships, and so the world has changed quite a bit. The thing I think about is authenticity is even more important now because if you go back to a number of years, you could go an entire career without even knowing where a person lived, let alone going over to their house. And today, there's a daily parade of people you know and you don't know kind of traps into your house through this little screen on the computer. So for me, the home is my identity. This is a place I can be the most authentic. So it's super important for me to be able to protect that, to defend it. So I've been collecting African art for almost 30 years. And it's all over my house. So you pop up a screen with me, guess what you're gonna see? That's me, that's who I am. And it's important to be able to preserve that. So as we are dealing with this challenge, not only the health, the economic crisis here, be yourself. It's super important to preserve your fortress of authenticity and making sure that you represent every day. You wake up with the face you were born with, and you're able to feel comfortable within your own skin. That's the only way we survive this. This is a hard thing on so many different levels, so it's super important.
Joanna,
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Sorry, I couldn't agree more, Lorenzo. I think one of the things that that COVID has brought on, right, is I think both a hyper awareness of our humanity for those of us who fall into those classifications. I'm I'm a very proud Latina, but I know within my own community, whether it was the healthcare professionals in our own hospitals, community hospitals here, the lack of PPE, things like that were impacting our every day. My husband happens to be a healthcare professional. And so one of those essential pros that gets called to the front lines. And when you have a deeply, I think a deep understanding of that, there is almost no barrier that this screen gives you to that reality. Is that you know that you're risking your life or your family's lives every time you walk out of the door, maybe to go to the grocery store, to have something delivered. All of these things I think we've become incredibly hypersensitive to in a way that maybe that we weren't necessarily before. I also think one of the things that has been, I think, an enormous challenge for those of us that come out of the Latino community. I don't mean to, I always look at it as that we are always all up in each other's business and very personal. And we, the hand gestures, and we kiss each other when we see each other. Even if I don't know you, you're going to get a kiss on the cheek. Those things have ended, right? And so the ability to make those personal connections and show respect doesn't always feel natural to us. And so that has been something that I have been working both with my teammates, but also, my children, right? Who, when, they leave the bubble of the safety of your home or things, that you have to become incredibly conscious that there is, there is this kind of new level of safety that is completely behavioral changing in a way that I don't think that we ever thought about it before. And for me, I become hyper aware of really trying to understand with my own team members, what is the situation that's going on at home? Do you have a loved one who is at risk, right? And opening up those conversations so that you give people permission to be authentic. One of the things that we do a lot of coaching on is often I'll be speaking with women or coaching women, and they'll apologize for having their children here. And I'm like, no, bring the kid in to the picture. This is a part of who you are. You are a mother, and we are asking you to, juggle being a mother, a teacher, a designer, an inventor, or whatever your roles, and those kind of, like, I kind of call it the slashes. We're a mom, we're a professional, you're this. I think we have started to give new name to Renaissance, because that whole self of bringing your whole self is here. For me personally, I speak Spanish. And actually, I speak Spanglish at home. Let me start there. That would be not a normal endeavor in my everyday. And I have to say that the working from home and inviting people into that place where you speak, you're a multilingual household, that, I've kind of learned to drop that veneer and just, start my conversations by saying, hola a todos mis amigas y amigos, buenas noches, buenos dias, whatever that is bringing that culture in my native tongue to the meeting. And what I have found is it truly a new level of acceptance from my peers, if anything.
If I can add to what Joanna just said, the main thing I absolutely love about Amazon, I love the engagement and I love the culture. Like, if you go into any FC, you see a number of high fives and fist bumps, right? And now that COVID has changed things for us, you're no longer hugging, you're no longer high fiving, you're no longer handshaking. And it's changed a lot for us within the FCs and our sites, as Lorenzo has mentioned, and now within this box where we're all in our office environment. So now my office is actually a school room. It's actually a gym for me as well, and also my therapist's couch as well. So we've merged all of these things in together, and it's really difficult. And so one of the things that I've done for myself and my team, and how we maintain that level of authenticity, is to be transparent. Lorenzo mentioned showing his artwork, right? I have my travel wall. I have a lot of things that normally would have been really, really personal that I wouldn't have wanted to share. And I think COVID has opened up our minds, it's opened up our hearts, and we're more sensitive, we're more aware of what's going on around us outside of what would have normally been a bubble for us. So, what I've done for my team, and I think that's important, and Joanne, you mentioned this, we've adjusted our meetings and our cadences, right? Because we know at the start of the morning, where we normally have our 8 a.m. meeting, our 9 a.m. meeting, well, that's when our kids need to start with their virtual learning. And so I've tried to adjust my meetings to make time, not only for me, but also for my staff as well. And that level of transparency, that level of exchange, I think that's helped us all, for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that as well, Derek. I think the transparency is so important, and that's such a big part of really connecting with teammates right now. Lorenzo mentioned it as well, just the disproportionate impact that COVID has had on Native American communities. I'm Shoshone-Bannock from the Fort Hall tribe in Idaho, and the disproportionate impact on Native communities is so vast, and many people don't know about it. And a lot of it is tied to the multi-generational households. Many of my family members live with grandparents or even great-grandparents, or are caring for extended families in their homes. And it's a really heavy burden, because not only are we trying to care for our elders, of course, losing people in our families is very difficult, but for us, this also means a loss of language and culture and tradition, because this is where our teachings come from. So I've been really open and honest about that with my team also, just trying to share that And it's funny because I've been at Amazon for about 7.5 years, and I have people kind of coming to me now saying, wow, I had no idea that you were Native American. And I realize I don't think I really talked about it as much before, but it's been a really good opportunity to educate people, to kind of let them in, show that vulnerability a little bit. And I think that's just a really important part of supporting each other right now. It just gives that connection opportunity. And then with what we're trying to do inside Amazon with our affinity group is really create those engagement opportunities for our Indigenous employees that are really missing out right now on those face-to-face connections. Summertime is huge for Native American people. We're usually out there having powwows and different celebrations, and we're just not able to do that right now. There's a lot of great movements happening online though. There's some virtual powwow groups that are really fun to get engaged in. So we're trying to replicate that as much as we can to create those opportunities, because we know that our employees and ourselves are really missing that.
Well, that's really great that you're mentioning a lot of the connection, right, that we're trying to implement to not have it exactly as in person, because that feeling is never going to be exactly the same, but definitely to help fill some of that void. So let's talk about you as leaders. How are you actually helping your members, right? Like, you know, as members of the community, you're dealing with it in a certain way, and you know, you're working, you're dealing with family and even traditions, right? At home. How are you helping your members from, you know, your affinity groups to actually navigate through this time? And you know, anyone can go first. Otherwise, I can start calling on
Sure.
them.
You know, I'll start off on this one because you know it's interesting. I have a really incredibly diverse team, both folks from different parts of the world. Right, we have designers, engineers, and creators and inventors from different parts of the world. And you know, many of them are recent immigrants into the United States. And I have to tell you that you know, not only are we dealing with COVID, but we're actually dealing with. I mean, we've got a lot going on in our space right now that you cannot disconnect from the day-to-day of your business, whether that's immigration issues that you have come across, you know, the fear of COVID in your community. For those of us that are living on the West Coast and dealing with climate-induced climate fires, and we're dealing with pollution that you can't even walk out of your home and breathe the clean air, many people are in a place of fear, right? The underlying emotion is fear. And as a leader, one of the things that I try to do at the beginning of every week with my own team is that we make this space to talk about that fear and create mechanisms to help them cope with it, because that fear is incredibly real. You know, if you are, you know, new to this country and you hear there is a ban on the kind of place that you came from, right? Or your part of the world is getting blamed for COVID, and now your neighborhood is undergoing riots, which we had people in our organization, you know, as right after George Floyd, you know, living in a time where we had peaceful protests, but we also had team members that were living in neighborhoods that were completely, you know, ablaze, and it wasn't from climate at that point. And so when you look at the social unrest, we have economic unrest and fear there. We have a ton of folks that have, you know, maybe their spouse has lost their job in another profession. One of the things that we try to do is create a safe space at the beginning of every single meeting in order for us just to update each other as team members. And then when, you know, sometimes you don't always feel comfortable in a group situation, but carving out the one-on-one time that maybe you would have focused on, you know, a portion of that is career development, but maybe a part of this is helping them cope and trying to create mechanisms that help people cope in ways that the company can help. And I think that for me has been trying to help people kind of create a plan A and a plan B. I think we're just living in a time of such great uncertainty that, you know, everybody wants to have the perfect plan A. And I say the plan A of, you know, we've had team members who are so fearful of the, you know, upcoming election. And if the election, you know, doesn't go a specific way, do I leave the country? Do I need to uproot my family? And so we give rest and a space for that conversation and try to connect it with our HR partners in a real way, so that what we're doing is integrating that in the conversation of, you know, how do we become a better, more empathetic community as we are going through these really, really serious societal changes that frankly you cannot unlink to the work that we do.
Hey, if I can add to that, I'm going to be honest. These are extremely tough times and that we're in now. And one of the things that I'm happy about, and I'm just going to come out and say it, you know, years ago, you never heard the term bringing your authentic self to work, right? That's something that's just recently become cool, and I'm thankful for it, right? Because it's brought that level of transparency that we were talking about earlier. And it's important that our teams, our associates, our employees know that it's okay to not be okay. Like, there wasn't a time years ago where you could say, hey, sir, ma'am, I'm really not feeling that great today. This is what's bothering me. We had to hold that in. And today it's okay to say, you know what, this is truly bothering me. And some of the things that I've done for my team, in addition to those one-on-ones that Joanna mentioned earlier, is that we've made it easier to bring all of those outside things that we talked about, like school, gym, your spouses. We've brought that into our daily lives and our work. And so with that, I've had meetings where you say, you know what, instead of your kid coming on camera and you trying to shoo them away, we've actually scheduled kid proxy meetings to where, you know, bring your kid. Now, granted that we've changed what we talk about during those meetings, but we made it really friendly to bring your child. We've had spouse meetings where we've included the spouses and significant others. And it's just to show that we know that you have many other things going on, and we want to make sure that you understand that we're giving you that time to focus on that, as well as your other work. So again, I think with all of those things, it's just really, really important that we remain open, we remain transparent, and we provide that forum for our teams to communicate to each other.
Derek, you know, you brought up a really good point of the, you know, 10 years ago, we would never have thought about that. There was almost a veneer, right, that you would bring in, you know, 10 years ago. And I give this example about the differences between the culture we have today and how accepting it is, and where I came from, which was, you know, I've come from the design world on Madison Avenue for 15 years in New York City. And I remember one time actually speaking Spanish in to a colleague that was from Central America. And I'll never forget how I was, you know, I was called out in that meeting, like, you're Mexican? Well, you don't look Mexican. And immediately, you know, your reaction is, it shuts you down in such a way that it didn't feel embracing. Like, how did you, it was, you know, presented like, how did you get in here? Whereas here now, it's really interesting. Our Amazonian culture, you know, is so diverse and has been so accepting. I don't feel that way anymore, right? I think that I have, you know, you come to terms with things not only of your you know, racial background, but I'm also dyslexic. And I would tell you 10 years ago, I would have never told anyone it was going to take me 5 more minutes to read a document. And when we're very much, as we all know, here at Amazon is a writing culture, and we're also a heavy reading culture. And at the beginning of the meeting, one of the things that has been really acceptable, I think, for me, has been to be able to say, hey, I'm dyslexic. I need about 10 more minutes to read this document, and then I can have a decent conversation around calculating that. So those are the kinds of things that I think that are, frankly, I wish all companies had this accepting culture. But I would say that in my experience here at Amazon, I have never felt more myself than any time else in my life.
Okay. Fawn or Lorenzo, do you want to chime in?
Why don't you go, Fawn?
Yeah, sure. I'll just add a little bit on top of what Joanna said too. I think in your first portion, you know, the work continues, and that's sort of the hard part here. People are being hired, they're being promoted, they're moving to different roles. I have found also that it's really important to still focus on that development piece with my team members. I don't want them to feel like everything's just paused and we're just kind of living day to day. So I'm really making an effort to have those long-term development conversations with them, talk about their promotions and their development. We've hired people during this period, which has been a really strange experience. And we have to put in a lot of extra effort, I think, during the onboarding to make them feel welcome, help them get to know us, help them onboard. And it's been a really good experience. I think it's definitely stretched how we connect with each other. And it has, I think, forced, I know myself as a manager, to really identify tools that I can use and actual mechanisms that are online to help facilitate these conversations, where before we might have just had these conversations in person. But now it kind of gets it all in writing and you're able to have these conversations. And then on top of that, Derek said it as well, just going back to just being honest. I'm definitely open with my team when I'm struggling. Sometimes I tell them, you know, I have to help with the 6th grade math test today. So I'm just not available because that's going to take a lot of effort for me. And that allows them to kind of share with me their difficulty in the same thing as well.
To have the business be so busy, and this is every aspect of what we do, at the same time going through pandemic, going through social unrest. So it's just, the reality is the world has kept going, and in our case, it's gone faster. I will say, it's also one of the things that's made me most proud being Amazonian, because during a crisis that's impacted the entire world, to see how we as a company reacted in terms of how we work to keep our corporate folks safe as we transition literally hundreds of thousands of people to a work from home environment, how we were re-gearing the FCs, which with physical distancing and all the safety measures you need to do, there's a lot of work. And oh, by the way, our customers still needed us. A personal story, I mean, there's a couple of people that are in their 70s, and we hadn't seen them for a while. They'd chosen to kind of hunker down. And he knew I worked at Amazon, and the first time I saw him, he said, thank you, thank Amazon for what you guys do. And I said, okay, thank you for thanking me. But he says, look, you guys took care of me. You allowed me and my wife to stay safe. And we were ordering cleaning supplies, we were ordering food, we were ordering the things that we needed to stay home and stay safe. So from my perspective, that's super important, and it makes me super proud of what we do. To the question of how do I, as a leader, look to help people stay authentic, especially at a time like this? Well, at a team level, I spend a lot of face time with my folks, and that's my leaders, and that's my analysts around the world. And part of that is to understand what they're going through. As I said before, I have people in 15 different countries, so it's a different experience anywhere you go. And certain of our countries, including China, had issues way earlier than others. So, I mean, it was a very real and material impact, both on our employees, their families, and as well as the work that they did. What I've also tried to do is championing other things that we can do. So I'm an executive sponsor for career growth and development within Finance Global Business Services. And there we basically went and spent several months turning everything virtual. So how do we take our content, and that's not just the hard and soft skills, it's the how do I deal with stress? How do I deal in this work from home environment? How do I prioritize into something that people could access anywhere in the world virtually? In the work that I do for affinity groups, I'm one of the executive sponsors for the Women in Finance Initiative, as well as being the executive for the Diversity Advisory Group, supporting Brandon Slavsky. And what we've spent a lot of energy on is how do we take this moment? There's a disproportionate impact on women and people of color throughout this crisis. For those who've read the most recent 2020 Lean In report on women in the workplace, there was a significant impact on women, and especially women of color, in terms of the number of women who are choosing to leave the workspace, the women who feel or are worried about being furloughed or laid off, the loss in leadership, especially in women of color at the more senior levels. So for me, these are the ways that we can contribute. I can personally help, and it's super important because throughout this, we don't want the legacy to be not only did we have a health crisis that impacted us from a human and an economic standpoint, we lost progress in an important area for ourselves, which is ensuring diversity, making the corporate space a better place for women and people of color to be in and to prosper.
I hear everyone sharing, and I appreciate that as well. your vulnerability and how you're modeling your authenticity, not just with your teams, but also with your affinity groups, even at home. Would you mind sharing your journey on how you got to that comfortable level, and hopefully with not too many acronyms in there, right? Of things that you've tried to get there on that comfort level, to be able to navigate through this time, and to be brave enough to be authentic, right? Especially during this time. And anyone can go first.
I'll take that one. You know, some of the things for the creative and design community, often, you know, we're so focused on being present, whiteboarding, group facilitation of workshops, you know, things like that. And some of the strategies that we've really taken is that, you know, it's really difficult to do those things when you are, you know, confined to a box, you know, on a screen. And I think, you know, some of those things in that journey were kind of the early days of, you know, doing something as simple as, you know, teaching people to tilt their camera down on their thing, and let's have, you know, quite literally drawing. I think, you know, Dora, you joined me for 5 Things every Monday morning. And I think one of the things that 5 Things has delivered to both inside and outside of the design community, right, has been giving people a voice to what inspires them to continue to think big, right? And to use that as a mechanism for us not to sometimes just kind of hunker down and just deliver a result, but continue to think big and push forward on that longer term thinking, which is really critical to, you know, the way that we lead here at Amazon. And I think the third part of this, and I think it's a really important one, is that so often cultures ask you to assimilate. And I think one of the strategies that I have really tried to do is, I'm not asking you to assimilate, I'm asking you to integrate, right? The integration of people's authentic selves into a process or expertise, and making space for that expertise in new and inventive ways. If it's just holding, you know, a talk series, we also do what we call, you know, Ask Me Anythings, where, you know, you just open the floor and it's ask me anything, right? And what we're doing is really trying to facilitate the conversation to get down to moving the ball forward, unblocking people from, you know, progressing. But I think even more importantly, you know, for us in the design community, you know, very big part of our job is simplify and invent. These fun little products on the back, I think, right, Echo shows require a tremendous amount of creativity and invention. And so, and typically, usually shoulder to shoulder collaboration with engineers. And so anything that we've been able to do, and sometimes it's simple as like tilting down and like, here's this sketch that I have, right? And here's the new product idea that I want to do, and trying to facilitate better ways of doing that when you don't have a whiteboard that you're sharing in front of you is, you know, kind of very, it seems like sometimes old school, but it's these little nuances that we do, that what we're trying to do is not ask people to assimilate, right, but integrate kind of not just the best practice, but what we're really inventing, frankly, in so many times in so many different ways, is the next practice.
You know, I normally share this really wonderful story about my crown and my hair that I've been growing since 2001. That's normally my favorite story to share, and me not cutting it when a lot of individuals around me told me I would need to cut my hair to be successful in corporate America. But I'll share one more recent one. So we kind of spoke to a little bit around the social climate and the racial inequality and the social injustice that's going around us right now. And between Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, it really, really put me in a tough position. Like, I was really going through a really, really tough time. And, you know, growing up and even, you know, matriculating through school, when you reach a certain point, it's like you can be Black, you can be yourself, but in certain times you can't be too Black. And during this time, I was really hurting in a really bad space. And normally I would not have felt the comfortable in the environment to share with not only my team, but my direct leadership how I was actually feeling. And, you know, it was overwhelming. And so I'm saying all that to say I was extremely comfortable to share that story, to share how I was feeling. And again, we talked about being vulnerable. And I did one presentation for my team and outside of Amazon, where I actually shared a number of different things on a PowerPoint slide, but I actually put those names of, and it was too many to name. It's really unfortunate, but I put each name on those slides. And before I advanced those slides, I said those names. I said Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, David McAtee. I said each one of those names to advance those slides. And, you know, normally I would not have felt comfortable doing that. And I love Amazon for creating that environment, but it really made me feel good. And I was able to use my voice, and I received a lot of other messages and thoughts from my team. But that's the journey that we've come from not feeling comfortable in our own skin and with our abilities to share to today. And so I feel, you know, with sharing that story and even about, you know, the story about my hair, I think it's just shown that overall growth. And again, just happy to be able to share and continue to be that voice and be transparent for others around as well.
And if you don't mind, Derek, I'll just pick up where you. So for me, very similar. The idea that I had to wear this social mask, and it's not uncommon. I mean, you were taught from an early age that you don't want to necessarily stand out, especially if you're in a professional environment. I've been with Amazon for 23 years, and I love this company. But for me, authenticity was a journey then, is a journey now, and it's something that I'm always thinking about, always working on. For me, what kind of put it in stark relief was one of my mentors. This goes back quite a bit, but we were in a meeting and we were discussing something that was difficult. It was at Amazon, there's always something difficult to discuss and some problem to solve. And frankly, I was a subject matter expert. I think we were talking about. And we were going through, there was dialogue, and one of the more senior leaders had a point of view, and I knew that it wasn't right. And I kind of did this delicate dance of how do you tell the senior leader they're wrong? And after the meeting, someone who had been one of my long-term mentors came up to me and said, "What were you doing?" I said, "What do you mean?" It's like, well, you are the person in there I did not recognize. This is not you. I've worked with you for a long time. So why weren't you being yourself? Why weren't you challenging? Why weren't you holding accountability? And I kind of thought about that. And he says, let me put this. You, I would promote. I know you. I know what you're capable of. The person in our room, I would not. And for me, that brought home the importance of bringing yourself in and being yourself and being willing to make a stand when necessary. And from that day forward, I can tell you, I never left feeling I ceded the ground. If I had a point to make, I made it, and I made it in my way. And if people didn't like it, well, I get it, and that doesn't always necessarily make you friends. But I do it with questions. I do it in a challenging way. I do it in a respectful way. But from that point forward, I never gave up the right to own an answer, especially when I knew what I was talking about. And that is a big part of being authentic, is being able to represent yourself, being willing to accept what you know and also what you don't know, but really being able to own your space.
I can add on top of that, Lorenzo. I think that's so important, what you touched on, just in terms of, sometimes you are putting yourself in an uncomfortable position, an uncomfortable situation. I will admit, I think I spent my first 4 years or so at Amazon kind of just laying low. We didn't have an Indigenous affinity group back then, but I didn't really even seek out another group that might be a good fit. I kind of just didn't think there was anybody else at Amazon that was like me. Honestly, it was about 4 years ago. I was sitting on a scholarship board. I was asked to participate in for Native American students in STEM. And I'm reading their application packets. And these high school and college students have been so involved in all of these professional organizations for Native American people. I had no idea. I had never even heard of most of them. So I'm like taking notes for myself, adding people to go look up on LinkedIn later. And it just kind of hit me how important it was to be a mentor to people and to get into that position. Now that I was moving into this manager role at Amazon, I had a platform. And so I kind of asked myself, what was I going to do with that platform and how could I use that to start to bring visibility to my people and my culture, try to debunk some of the popular myths that people think about when they think about Native American people, or and being Native American, I am often the only person or the only Native person that people have ever met, or maybe the first one they've ever met. And that comes with a lot. That's a heavy burden to fill. And sometimes you have to have those uncomfortable conversations and help people learn maybe terms that are more culturally appropriate. But I've seen a lot of change in the time that I've been involved in the affinity group. And it's so motivating and really inspiring, and especially seeing the leadership commitment that we have within our company to really move that forward. So sometimes it's uncomfortable, but it's been really worth it.
That's great. And let's take a chance to look at this more broadly also, like not just COVID, right? So I'll give you an example. This summer, I was mentoring one of the interns, and one of the things, that we were going over were the leadership principles, and they were a little stuck on customer obsession, right? Because they're here as an intern, they don't see that they're actually dealing with the outside consumer, which I guess is the easiest thing to connect with. And I just connected the dots. I was like, well, your team is your customer too, and your manager and your department, and that department rolls up to, executives that handle the whole organization. So whatever products or services that your organization provides, that's also your customers. And then when they provide their particular products or services, that's going to those consumers, and then ultimately outside to the customer externally to Amazon. So we're really all connected. And I think the customer just turns, into different entities or people as we go through, the different things that we deliver each day. So I said, you're home now, so your customer is also your family. You need to, be responsible for it, whatever it is that you're doing at home to help there as well. So, let's take a look about that. Your leadership in the bigger world piece here. How is it that you're mentoring others and to navigate during this time for growth, right? And not just some healthy assimilation that we may have to adjust to the times that we're living right now.
One of the things that for us in the devices organization that I think is so really important when we talk about customer obsession is the importance of representation, right? And it's both representation in the people that are actually creating our Alexa experiences, but it's also representation, particularly when we're doing research and the research that you're doing. Ensuring that when we're talking about being customer obsessed, it's actually, coming out of the comfort zone sometimes of just being locked inside the data. While that is always important, but understanding how diversity will improve our products and will improve the usability of a product. And I give this really good example of when my first days here was actually transacting and engaging with our S team. And it was really identifying a problem. It was a $66 million design problem, but nonetheless a problem that all came down to that when we did our original research, perhaps we didn't have the diversity in the cohort or the customers that we needed to go talk to get to a 95% of the global population. And that's really important when you think about wearables, things that you wear, whether they're, they're fit for you and they're comfortable, and we're creating products that we're bringing you this new source of intelligence with through the power of Alexa, that you want to ensure that when we're making these products, that they're accessible to 100% of humanity. So how do you go about doing that? And so having that conversation in a really frank way with a senior executive at the S team level was, I think, one of my first unnerving moments, which felt uncomfortable. But because when you boil down to it, it was my ability to say, listen, representation matters. If we only represent this kind of person in our studies, the product's only going to fit that kind of person. And so being able to make the case for both representation on the team and in how we recruited to do testing and beta testing of our devices was one of those first examples of where our customer obsession, kind of collides with the importance of diversity, both ethnic diversity as well as neurodiversity.
There it is. All right. With that, I'm going to just take us to a round robin so we can have our last one questions here. So I guess we can finish up and wrap this particular section saying, what is that one thing that you do to stay centered in your authenticity, in your identity, in your superpower, right? Like, so what is that one thing you do to stay centered in your superpower?
I listen to my children jokes about me. Sorry. Sorry. My family is my focus. They are my center. Everything I do is for them, and who I am is about them. So that's how I do what I do. Anyone on this screen today can tell you how hard what we do is, and to be able to do it for a day, a week, a month, let alone years, takes a lot of work. And it also takes commitment from your loved ones. It takes support. We could not do what we do without our family. So for me, that's what drives me, and it's also what keeps me in the middle, so to speak. Fun? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. That's a tough question. I think that, there's just so much happening right now. I think for me, the biggest thing that I'm committing to is trying to understand that I can't do it all. I read an analogy somewhere, I'm sure you all have heard of this as well, but the juggling of the balls in the air, and you have so many balls in the air, and some of them are work and some of them are family and pets and parents and other things. And what I've definitely realized is that some of those balls are glass and some of them are plastic. Every day we're going to drop some of them. So for me, I wake up every day and think, which balls are going to drop today? Because it's going to happen. And so I really just kind of restructure, realign. I have a to-do list that I start every single day fresh, and I check off the things that are not going to happen that might shift to tomorrow. And something that maybe was a glass ball yesterday is now a plastic ball because it's not a priority anymore. So for me, it's been really important to just realize I can't do it all. I have to be really honest with everybody around me and really set expectations, even for my family members, even for my 4-year-old. I'll tell him, like, I know I promised that we would go to the park today, but I can't. So here's a popsicle instead. And sometimes that's the best I can do.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Fawn, I got to tell you, I'm stealing that one. I love that. I love the balls. Matter of fact, I'm going to go. My kids are going to be glass. They're probably glass balls all the time. So that was really nice. One of the things that I make sure to keep me grounded. Number one, I stay prayed up and spend that time with my faith. And more importantly, that mental break. Amazon, we have some really awesome programming. October 10th is World Mental Health Day. And one of the tips, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, one of the tips was similar to what you said, Fawn. Don't think about all the things on your to-do list that you didn't accomplish. Like, look at those 1 to 3 things that you did, and then just, bask in those, and then think about what you're going to look forward to tomorrow. And for me, what keeps me grounded are my teams, my family. When I can walk in and see them smiling, and then doing things like this, and having the opportunity to share it with everyone that's going to be on the other end of the summit. So again, what keeps me grounded is family, faith, and then everyone that's on this panel and all of you, which are my newfound friends. So that's my 6 cents.
Joanna?
Sure. For me, it's actually really super similar, and similar to what Fawn talked about. For me, it was that realization that you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. And deciding what are those time periods and what does all mean, by the way, right? It's defining what does all mean to you and your family. Spending time with my family, and I have a multi-generational family. So my mother, and in this time of COVID, I have university kids who are back in New York, right? And one of the things that we do is every night we have dinner together via one of these lovely devices here that just went off behind me. And we get that notification that it doesn't matter what time of the day it is, that we're all going to kind of have a moment and sit and have dinner together. And we turn on our cameras as if we were all sitting around the same table, just as we would in person. And I think that's been really critical in kind of keeping us connected, and just kind of aware of what we're doing. From a parent standpoint, when you're an early empty nester, you're just learning to give up the reins of what it means, the day to day. And hopefully everything that you did to this point is working out. In a pandemic, that really gets put to the test, to say the least. And then the other thing that I do is find time for myself. And I happen to have, just if I tilted my camera over to the side, you would see I have a Peloton bike where I've got a small community of women that I ride with, right? And I spend, funny enough, I've actually carved out time during the day that is just to kind of give myself both that mental health break, but also a time to connect with my community of riders. So for me, it's staying connected to the things that I love. I meditate for my faith as well. But the other part was the physical activity. I tend to be an extrovert. So the fact that I'm not out and about and kind of, going from, being in San Francisco to Sunnyvale and then traveling to New York and things, that has been a real adjustment for somebody like me. And so finding new ways of staying connected to that community in a healthy way has been a centering focus for me.
All right. With that, I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing their authenticity, their vulnerability today, and showing us that authenticity really matters. So with that, thank you everyone for tuning in to this panel, and thank you for joining us.